She came on the scene California bound, and in the 1800s, that could look a lot different than it does today. Being California bound modern days could look a lot like trying to become famous, or maybe even just a family vacation to Disneyland. Or maybe just looking for some wine tasting, whatever, California things. However, today's queen found herself in San Francisco in the 1800s to deal herself some cards, using her exotic beauty to control the men at her table, making history to be one of the first women to deal blackjack in America. Already considered exotic due to her French nature, she became even bigger of an exotic talk of the town and very sought after. When making a name for herself at the table for not only being a woman, but being very good at 21. She was charming, friendly, and sophisticated. Men found themselves honored to be at her table. Hello, my name is Summer, and this is Paying For It.
I got something between my legs that'll make a dead man come. Oh, that. I got something between my legs that'll make a dead man come. Oh, that. I'm gonna turn back my mattress and let you all my springs. I want you to find me, daddy, till the bell do ring. Oh, daddy, I want you to shade and dry.
Thank you for being here for episode 29. Today's story will focus on a queen that made her mark for far different reasons than what we normally talk about here on Paying For It. However, a part-time madam and a full-time gambler still made a history maker, as she was one of the first women to make their mark dealing cards. That was a quote-unquote man's job, but she proved to the men of the world and the young girls watching that it didn't have to be, showing the world that girls can do it too. We will be getting to all of that and more on today's episode, but before that, how the heck are ya? I hope you all are having a lovely day and week. So far I'm having a great week and everything, and I've been doing a lot of thinking about paying for it. So let's talk about some channel updates. This is so my passion, and I really want to make sure I do our queens of history right. So I want to give them the time and energy they deserve. Of course, researching them makes me so happy. And I feel like I'm bringing some light to the women of history who deserve it and who fairly get lost in the man's world, Also, I bring a light to a hidden part of history when it comes to our vice side and how informative and kind of culturally driven it was. How important our vice is actually to our history. I originally started this podcast putting video versions on YouTube, I think like the first 3, but I was afraid that with that, I wouldn't be able to include all the things that I wanted in the video versions without getting in trouble or just in general, like getting my videos taken down or whatever, because here we are talking about a little bit of a taboo subject that people get touchy over. And I wanted to be able to say what I wanted and put what I wanted in my videos without having the fear of getting it removed. So I had made the decision to put them behind a paywall because I thought that that was the correct thing to do moving forward, because it was a little bit of a spicier topic. But to be honest, I'm very new at this, and was probably jumping the gun. I knew it then and I still know it now. Anyways, It's something I do in life in general, kind of jumping the gun. It suits me. But I have made an executive decision. I'm foregoing my Patreon for now. Don't fret though, because that means I'm just going to be uploading my video versions onto YouTube for all to enjoy. I say, fuck it. Let's just try it out. Let's put it out there. Let's see what happens. This will help me cut a lot of steps out of my flow, because at the moment, taking on the promotion that I did and just taking on more days at work with that promotion, it just isn't conducive, but also it just isn't conducive for me to just be like trying to upload a bunch of from different things and just trying to get them linked. And that's really driving my exhaustion when it comes to like doing the back end of this, because researching and writing and recording, those are the fun parts of it all. It's everything else that's kind of a drag. But anyways, I'm hoping that just cutting it down to uploading audio and uploading video will make it much more easier, hopefully. Yeah, because really I was uploading you had to upload the video versions to YouTube, then link them to your Patreon. And then I had to upload a whole, make and download a whole new audio version for YouTube and upload that. And then upload the audio version to Spotify. And it was just a lot. On top of that, making shorts and TikToks, it was becoming too much. I was running out of time. I wasn't getting everything I was supposed to be done. And then I was just finding myself not wanting to do it because it was a lot and I was feeling like a failure. But I have decided, for me and for everyone else, let's just say fuck it and see what we can do. If YouTube says no, ma'am, then we'll go from there. But hopefully they don't say no, because this is history, baby. So we should be able to talk about history without being too much in trouble. Nothing will change on the audio front. That will stay the same, although I have to iron out a new schedule that works better with my new schedule at work. So episodes will be coming out weekly. I'm back on it, baby. I'm there. We're here. We're doing this. However, I'm not sure when they will be uploaded. They'll be out once a week, and it'll just be when I finish them. And hopefully that will be back on Thursdays, so that the video versions will come out on the following day or next day. Not the following day, but like 2 days later, if that makes sense. So if they come out on Thursdays, you'll see video versions on Saturdays on YouTube. But I'm just going to let myself kind of iron that out naturally. And I know that I will end up in a flow eventually, but one that's not forced and one that will come easier for me. Because that's another thing. Forcing myself into a due date and feeling like I'm failing at it, like it's just not working and I want it to work. So we're going to let myself naturally flow back into things. I'm going to try to and let my uploading schedule find me instead of forcing one on myself. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that that's okay with you guys for a bit. We're going to get back into the flow, and we're going to get back into having regularly scheduled content more often. I hope that makes sense. I hope that is making sense to all, okay? Audio will go out 2 days before the video version, and now you will be able to see me and all my funness and spicy history on YouTube, available 2 days later. Okay, so look out for that. This is the first one. Hello, welcome. Are you seeing my face? Hello. Oh boy. I think it's a good decision for me because I really want to share these stories of the wild and glamorous life of the woman of our history. And I want it to be enjoyed by all that can find me, really. If they like my spicy history, I want them to be here included. And I feel like this is the best way to do that. Anyways, that is the housekeeping. And with that out of the way, I went and saw let's just talk about me for a little bit. I'm just kidding. I went and saw the Nun 2 the other day with my boyfriend, and we had like the theater all to ourselves, and we don't work weekends. We work weekends, so we have weekdays off. And we went and seen a scary movie in the middle of the day, like early. And so we had the whole theater to ourselves, and it just added like a whole new awesome spooky vibe to this theater and this movie viewing situation, and it was great. Okay. Yeah, so he was a little panicky and a scary cat. We loved that for him, but it was a good movie. It wasn't a bad one. It was a nice one to kick off our fall spooky vibes over here. Okay. And yeah, welcome to fall. We love that. And also my work kicked off Oktoberfest, and it was a blast. We dressed up in our dirndls and we sold a lot of beer. I'll post a picture of me and my cute little dirndl, and it's adorable. I tried all 4 of the Oktoberfests that we had on the line as of right now. My favorite so far was the Eyinger Oktoberfest, which makes sense because that's like the top rated Oktoberfest beer of the world. So yeah, it was very good. We have one more that hasn't been tapped up yet, so I'm excited to try that. I've also been out here trying to find all the Oktoberfest around to like sip in, and I'm curious little gal over here. I wanted to try them all. So yeah, I can't wait to have a little sippy of the Founders Oktoberfest, and I will let you know how I feel about that one when I do. But if you are someone who celebrates or is into beer and gets excited for Oktoberfest, if you're in a place where you can find the Eyinger Oktoberfest, I highly recommend you going and grabbing one. I think you'll like it. We are also getting geared up for NOLA, and my mom is so excited. So am I. Everyone that's going with us is so excited. I've gotten all my costumes, so I'm just getting very, very hyped. We're going to be in NOLA for Halloween, and it's going to be a spooky vibe, that's for sure. We're very excited, and that New Orleans has a huge history when it comes to sex work and ladies of the night, and I've literally been keeping all the ones of New Orleans and all the good, because they have Storyville, they have huge madams. I did talk about Norma Wallace because she was my first real toe into really wanting to speak on their lives and stuff like that and researching them. But everyone else that has come out of New Orleans, I have been waiting patiently, because I'm about to talk about them after I get back from New Orleans. So, a little insight to what November is going to look like. Oh, honey, you better be here because it's going to be good. And also it's spooky season, baby. And yeah, you bet you little bottom booty that what? I don't even know if that's the saying or if I just like pulled it out of thin air, but you bet your little bottom booty that as soon as fall was official, I was having my boyfriend bring out all the spooky decorations. We have all the spooks up. Well, we started decorating yesterday and we're going to finish tonight. So when you come back next week, get ready for spooky niceness, okay? We'll be here ready, and what am I even saying? We'll be here all spooked up, okay? We will be. Anyways, today's queen story only mildly involves sex work. When I first heard her name, I put her on my list because, hello, madam. Research, though, I put her on my list to research because with Madam being in her title and a notable woman of the Wild Wild West, I just assumed for sure she would be a part of the sex work world, which I wasn't wrong on that front. She eventually does find herself actually being a madam of a brothel at certain points in her life. Although today's madam is notable in history not just for her brothel running days, in fact, similar to Calamity Jane, who we talked about in episode 21, part 2 of my Deadwood series, like Calamity, this queen made history for skills that made her stand out in the man's world she was born into. So with that, so she's only a part-time lady of the night, she's only a part-time sex worker, but we should still talk about her because her story still is worth being talked about. So with that, you know what time it is. Grab yourself a cocktail, a mocktail, a coffee, a beer, whatever you fancy. Today, I have, can you guess? Shiner Oktoberfest. It's my day off, baby. And although it's 2 p.m, it's 2:30. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. We're going to jump into this lovely, I've had Shiner Oktoberfest way back in the day before, like, I was really into beer, I guess, when I was just starting to get into beer. So I don't quite remember what it tastes like, but Shiner is my favorite beer. So I'm assuming they have a very good Oktoberfest. Also, my boyfriend got me a new bar key, and it's so cute. I love it so much. So I'm a big mythical, Good Morning, or why can't I just call them mythical all the time? But what's their actual channel? Oh, okay. I got it, guys. Good Mythical Morning. Anyways, Rhett and Link, I'm having a full-on brain fart on what their channel name actually is. Anyways, they came out with an awesome bar key, and they always have groovy stuff. And if you know me, I'm a spooky hippie, okay? So they came out with their own bar key, and on the back side it says mythical. It's amazing. But then on the front side, it's the best, okay? It says, you know what time it is. And oh boy, we know what time it is. So, we're going to go ahead and pop that. I made such a mess. That's hilarious. Just going crazy. Oh my gosh. I didn't even realize that magnet on there, that's a neat little feature. Okay. So we popped that up, made a mess. Hello. It smells delicious. We've got a glass. Let's pour it in. Let's maybe not make another mess. Okay. Now, Oktoberfest are traditionally Marzen-style lagers, and all the ones that we've had at work have been on the lighter side. And for some reason, my whole life, I just assumed that Oktoberfest were darker beers. But this one is a bit darker. It's more like a Shiner color. So yeah, anyways, but the Hofbrau that we had at work it's like a lager. It tastes like a lager. It looks like a lager. It pours like a lager. So yeah, cheers, 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 cheers. I hope whatever you have, you're enjoying it. And let's get into it. So shall we? All right, cheers. And let me introduce you to Madame Elenor Dumont. Okay. Apparently, Oktoberfest are more fruity. I don't know. I'm going to have to look that up. This one has a fruitier taste, which is kind of weird. Anyways, born Simone Jules, sometime in 1829. A lot of her childhood, of course, is a mystery to history. However, It is believed that she was born to French Creole parents in New Orleans. I hope I said that word right. I really tried. Her background is a bit confused, and it's important to note that a lot of the confusion when it comes to Elenor herself is because of Elenor. Some sources say that she was actually a French descendant and migrated from France. The confusion, we can think, like I said, mostly due to Simone herself. This was because when she arrives on the scene, she has created a exotic persona for herself, fibbing her background story to make her even more of a mysterious woman when entering her career and new life. So anyways, there is some confusion on where Simone is originally from, but it seems like most historians believe that she was from New Orleans. Her story begins for us, though, in San Francisco, California, in 1849. What leads her there is pretty unclear. We're not really sure why she goes there, okay? We don't really know her background. And was it a good one? Is it a bad one? How did she learn what she is going to soon be known for? And all that good stuff. Oh, all the juicy details I'd like to know. However, she probably does choose San Francisco because it was the new up-and-coming boomtown. San Francisco at this time was experiencing its gold rush. With any gold rush came thousands and thousands of men looking for work and hoping to hit it rich in gold and change their lives forever. Like any boomtown, San Francisco quickly exploded, and soon the town had temporary buildings going up left and right. Makeshift tent houses, hotels, stores, saloons, and gambling halls, which all eventually morphed into solid structures. Simone arrives in San Francisco in 1849, right in the middle of this boom. She is 21 years old and is a very exotic beauty for this town. She's beautiful with deep dark eyes and piles of natural curls perfectly pinned on her head. Simone, though, wasn't just a beauty. She was also already very skilled in dealing cards and was ready to make her mark in the world of gambling. If you're thinking with your modern brain, you might be thinking, okay, no big deal. We have female dealers all over the place. However, in the 1800s, a woman gambling was pretty much unheard of, and they would try and probably be laughed at or bullied out of the whole scene. But a lady being a dealer in a gambling hall, well, that was a wild notion. At this time, men truly felt that they ruled and owned the world. And anything fun or vice related was for men. And if you were a lady, if a lady even thought about joining, they would be ridiculed. They would be considered a fallen woman. It would ruin their entire reputation for just the fact of one, wanting a drink, two, wanting to play some cards, and or having any kind of fun back then, you know? So Simone, she was smart and knew that she wasn't just beautiful, she was truly skilled at dealing cards. So she, as a young girl, was determined to take those skills and do a bit of mining on her own. When getting to San Francisco, Simon will step into her persona, introducing herself as Elenor Dumont, and telling people that she was an immigrant from France. It is believed that she did this because at the time, men were all but obsessed with exotic women, especially ones from France. On top of that, this was a time French held women at a very different status, and already their women could play cards, and it was often women were card dealers in France. So she already had the look and accent, kind of. So she just decided she was going to run with it, which smart girl, right? She was also very sophisticated already, known to be extremely, extremely charming, and like smart. So this really allows for her to control the men who she deals cards to. People, if I'm being honest, men were drawn to her because of her beauty, charm, and most importantly, her skill at 21. Elenor will get her first big job in one of the San Francisco's most notable gambling halls called Bella Union. Elenor was most skilled at 21, and she will quickly gain a reputation for herself around this boomtown. She was dignified and reserved. When men at her table behaved crudely or just bad-mannered, Elenor would act unruffled and or unbothered, not letting any of the men get under her skin, or at least not showing that they got under her skin. This for men was like a shock factor and a wow factor. Why? Well, because let's be honest here, a lot of these men were drunkards who have gotten away with doing and saying whatever they wanted. Used to getting reactions that are big and scandalized from women of this time period. Plus, on top of that, with boomtowns in the beginning, there were a lot more men than women. We're talking like 10 to 2 kind of thing, or 20 to 2. Like the men outweighed the women by far more, okay? So it really was that Elenor was in a world of men who, not all, but most, didn't know how to behave around others, especially women. So Eleanor's ability to be unbothered and around these rough and tumbled mining men really got under these dudes' skin in a way that brought them coming back to her table time and time again. Here was this woman not only gorgeous, great at cards, but also she gave no shits about the men sitting at her table, who at times probably could be very cruel and doing downright nasty shit, okay? This was a time men really just went unchecked. They said what they wanted, they did what they wanted, they were like rough, like they were rough. They said shit that was like, today you're out in public, you're sitting at like a poker table, you don't expect a man to just say whatever nasty shit's on their mind. And sometimes there's some nasty shit on men's mind, okay? But back in the day, they would just say it. They didn't care. They didn't get in trouble. They didn't have any rules that they had to follow. So they would just say some weird shit and you'd be just like, ew, what the fuck? But she just was like unbothered. She'd be like, okay, like moving on. Like she would just not react to it. And sometimes these men would say these like outrageous shit to get a reaction from the women around them because they didn't know how else to be. And again, hashtag not all men, but back in the day, kind of all men. She also showed no interest in dating any of the men coming and going from her tables, even though plenty of the men, all of the men, probably tried. While in San Francisco, she did very well for herself. Of course she did. And she was able to save quite a bit of the money throughout her years working the tables at Bella Union. So when she was let go from Bella Union due to rumors of her card sharping, this just means that Elenor was suspected of cheating, although it's very important to note that a lot of sources say that she never was a card shark, that she never cheated. So it could be that an upset Patreon spread a rumor, possibly it's history mistelling, or maybe it's true and she had cheated. It is fairly hard to tell either way. Either way, her being let go, it didn't affect her that much. She took her savings and was ready to pack up and get ready for another adventure in a new city. So she was off to the next up and coming boomtown, because that's what you did back then when like things started to dry up in one boomtown, or if you got fired from one thing, or you were kind of just like used up your resources in one town, you were off to the next, okay? And at this time, boomtowns were popping up left and right. Gold, silver, all that shit was coming about. And so new up and coming towns were being talked about all the time. So now she's going to be arriving in Nevada City, California in 1854. Nevada City was another mining town popping off at this time. This was another very rough and tumble town with few to little women around. So when Elenor steps on the dirt streets of the main town, she is of course going to gain the attention of everyone in town. She was 26 years old and had big plans for herself and her future. Elenor checks into the Phepps Hotel under the name Madame Elenor. She spends her first few days in town window shopping these empty lots of Broad Street, so their main street of the town. There's a bunch of empty lots for sale, and she spends like most of her first few days shopping those, looking for the perfect location. This, of course, is going to get the town talking and gossiping. Here's this young, unmarried, single woman dressed to the nines, okay, window shopping for buildings. This was super, super shocking for the times. Women just didn't do this shit, okay? Men did. So for a woman to do it, it like gained some gossip, gained some talk. People were like, what's happening here? One of the few women who was already in town will go on to remark about Elenor, stating to a local newspaper, "There's got to be some bad in a girl with all her charm, who seems to have nothing to do but start up and down Main Street." This statement really gives you an insight to what it was like to be living in this time for a couple different reasons. The main one I have to point out is the damn motherfucking judgment, okay? Like, imagine if you wanted to open a business as a woman and you just are casually shopping for buildings and just kind of like browsing like we like to do, and the next day the townspaper has an article written about you, just like some random lady of the town quoted, just assuming you were partly bad, like a partly bad person because you were walking and checking things out. Like, that was all. She was upset and calling her partly a bad person because she was walking up and down Main Street. So in my head, what I'm assuming this lady already thought of her was that she was walking up and down looking to find a building to probably start a brothel. This is why she assumed she was somewhat bad, was because she felt that this lady was coming into town to bring in the ladies for like sex, like she thought, here we go, and so she just already put that on her. But even if she wasn't putting that on her, she was just putting that on her like because she was wandering like a single woman. Like, come on, goodness gracious, I can't. Another point is how weird it would be if you moved into a new place and you were the talk of the town, so much so that they write articles about you. Like, that would be so strange today. Like, if you moved into, like, just for instance, if you're moving into, like, a big city, because that's what these were. These boom towns were, like, the big cities, the new up-and-coming big cities. Most of them, at least. And, you just moved into the town and you were the talk of the town, and just articles after article were written about you. And then people were staring at you because they didn't know who you were. They didn't know what to expect. But it gives this like almost celebrity factor to moving. It's so weird to me. That would be so weird. Living back in the like 1800s or even like the early 1900s, all of that is so weird. It just really hurts my brain to think like that's how we actually lived back then. People really did live these lives, and it's wild. The townspeople didn't have to wait too long, though, to figure out what she was up to when she finally is going to go ahead and settle on the perfect building for her. To announce her plans, she delivers a handbill, which is basically a small printed advertisement or other notice that she distributes by hand to the person. So she writes it out, she goes to someone and gives it to them, probably paying to run this like ad. She gives this handbill to Edward G. Wright, the editor of Nevada City's transcripts, basically paying for an ad announcing her grand opening of Vent and Un. That's okay. So basically paying for an ad announcing her grand opening of Vent and Un. Her saloon was named 21 in French, playing more into the persona she has created for herself. And I'm sorry if I butchered Vent and Un. I tried hard. Vent and Un wasn't going to be your typical gambling saloon, though. Elenor planned for her establishment to be very high class and very sophisticated. She planned to make sure that she commanded that room and all eyes were always on her. When you are the one dealing the cards, majority of the time you'll have everyone's attention. However, she wanted to make sure to have all the gentlemen's attention the entire time. To do this, her first rule of her saloon was no women allowed besides herself. Excluding women seems like a shitty thing to do, honestly. It is and will always be. However, for the time, not a huge shocking thing. She had her reasons, and no one was going to be like, no other woman was going to have like a far outcry. And even if they did, no one would pay attention to her, sadly. Most women coming in to these gambling halls wouldn't be really playing anyways at the table, instead being someone's date or maybe coming in looking for a date for the night. Wink, wink, if you get what I mean. Taking attention off the ladies of and that would only take the attention off the lady of the house, Elenor, and she wanted none of that. She was like, Part of her charm was her beauty. So even though Elenor didn't ever sell sex, she was still in a way selling the idea of sex, tease, and temptation. She was skirting the line of vice, dealing cards, gambling, kind of always giving you that hope that if you could just hit it big enough or say the right things, you may get to take the lady at the house home. But for her, that was just what she was selling, that idea. So women weren't allowed in. In fact, she didn't even allow them to linger outside her place at all. No distractions for the men coming her way. If you were coming to her house, you were coming to see her, and that was that. Another rule she put in place for vent in un God was men entering to play with her were required to dress up in their best attire. So the men had to come fancy. This was a fancy place. This was sophisticated. You had to be looking sharp if you wanted to come sit at her table. The men also had to be on their best behavior, as she did not allow them to cuss or act crude in any way. And even though many of the men coming through her doors tried so very hard, she never once slept with any of them. She always reminded them that her establishment wasn't that kind of place, nor was she that kind of lady. However, she always remains available, always giving you that idea that if you could just do the right thing, that maybe one day she would choose you. But it was never going to happen for her. She had rules in place for herself too. She really did not sleep with the men that came through. In fact, Elenor kept her life outside of dealing cards very, very private. Little to no information is available about her outside of dealing cards. So it is widely believed that she kept to herself, focusing on making money and having no time for love, at least for the younger part of her years. Even though Faro was the popular card game at the time for the minors, and just in general for everyone, at this time Faro was the big card game. Elenor was really good at 21, and the minors were willing to give 21 a chance as long as it was Elenor the one dealing it to them. The local miners considered it a high privilege and honor to play with Elenor. She would celebrate their wins genuinely with them, happy for them when they came out on top. She would feel and mourn their losses. In general, she was known to be very caring and compassionate to the people at her table. Poker back then was a big deal. It still kind of is a big deal. But with no regulations, people could win big, big, big. But they could also lose even bigger. She knew that, and she was able to be there on both sides of the coin for them. Unlike most gambling dens and saloons and halls who offered whiskey or beer, Elenor offered a nice French champagne, playing even more into that French sophisticated persona she had created for herself. Eventually, Elenor will meet a man named David Tobin. He was a gambler, and most likely that's the why, or that's the how they met. Most likely that's how they met, but he also was an entrepreneur. Elenor and David will become fast friends, and he will go on to help Elenor expand her empire in Nevada City, and she will go on to open a second saloon with David named Dumont's Place in 1859. It was an instant hit and very successful for them. Their new saloon would include other games to be played like Faro, and Elenor also wouldn't be the only dealer. In fact, she may not have ever actually dealt in this saloon, or at least not much at all. Hiring others to work the game tables. It's unclear if she relaxed the rules in this location. Did she allow women in the saloon? Did the men dress up, or was this her more casual experience? The answer to those questions may forever be a mystery to history. Little is actually known about the going-ons of the second location, other than that it was known to be extremely successful for her. That was until Nevada City dried up. Like most gold rush towns, they eventually evened out and then eventually will go on to dry up completely. A lot of the big boom towns hit gold and then put back money into the town, growing a community outside of just gold. Nevada City, though, it wasn't as lucky or as smart, or it just didn't know to do that. Already in a kind of exclusive area, kind of in the middle of nowhere, when things started to dry up in the mines, the town had nothing else really to offer, and eventually the money faded from the area. Sadly, even though Elenor had been very, very successful, her town wasn't. So eventually she had to close up both of her shops and move on. At this point, Elenor is around 30 and she decides that she wants a break from dealing. Mind you, that she was a dealer, so she also was a gambler for a living. Her job kept her in the middle of vice and the towns that vice thrived in. So she possibly was feeling maybe burnt out and clearly was really ready and wanting a change. So with the money she had saved in Nevada City, California, she went off for her next big adventure, one that takes her life down a path that is quite unexpected. This lands her in Carson City, Nevada, where she will purchase a ranch and a bunch of farm animals. Our Elenor was a rancher now. Kind of. Not really. Turns out ranching isn't all that easy and she was in way over her head. So she decides she needs some help, and that's when she meets a man named Jack McKnight. The answers to all of her problems. He had ranching experience and was a cattle buyer, so he had connections and knowledge in this world that she was just starting in. Sources say that right away, Elenor fell for this man, head over heels in love with him. I'm not so sure how we know that, and if she really did love him, or if she just felt as someone, or if she just thought of him as someone like David, who she had trusted to help her with her new adventure. I'm not quite sure, to be honest. Sources say they were in love, though. Or at least Elenor was. And she was clearly trusting in him. That's the thing about con men, though. They are good at what they do. Getting you to trust them by saying all the right things. Genuinely making you feel like you're in good hands. And if they need to, they will make you fall in love. Jack McKnight was your historical con man, and his next target was unfortunately Elenor Dumont. Because Elenor was quite infamous for who she was as a person, even back then. And this leads us to a series of events that will change the direction of Eleanor's life, scarring her forever. Jack will take her for literally all she is worth. Elenor couldn't see that he was using her, and soon he will sell the ranch out from underneath her, stealing everything. Literally everything. Like I said, slashing her down to her core, something she never really will heal from, in my opinion, and in this event will leave her deeply scarred. And the next event may be her origin story. Good or bad, you'll have to decide. Up until this point, Elenor is regarded as a well-spoken and sophisticated lady that just so happens to be good at cards. To make a career in cards, one has to be brave enough to venture into rough and tumbled boomtowns. They are notorious for being wild, rowdy, and sometimes dangerous. However, as far as history shows us, Elenor never joined in on all the wild ways, nor did she live the rough and tumble wild days. Though she did pretty much grow up there as a young adult, she may have never joined in the wildness, but she definitely was a watcher and learner. Possibly heartbroken, angry as hell, and hurt, she took what she learned from all those years of living in boomtowns and vice, and she tracked down that motherfucking man, the one who did her dirty. She had a score to settle, so when she met back up with the man who called himself Jack McKnight, she pulled out her double-barrel shotgun, firing point blank into his chest, turning and walking away without a care in the world while Jack lay dying, killing him and seemingly okay with the consequences of her actions. Except none came for Elenor. Even though she didn't try and run, she stayed and was ready to be taken in pretty much. She was the number one and only known suspect in his murder. Everyone pretty much knew she did it. She will never, though, be arrested for her crime, essentially getting away with murder. This leaves Elenor, though, broke, alone, and a very changed woman. She decides to pack up and hit the road again, back to her roots and what she knows she's good at. She goes back to gambling, dealing cards, and traveling from town to town, this time really embracing the life of a gambler and a rough and tumble lady of the West. She also embraces a new way of bringing in income and fully embracing her title as Madam. While in Fort Benton and Bannack, Montana, Elenor will open up a brothel and saloons, dealing cards and ladies now. Although Elenor would never sell sex herself, she got pretty good at being a madam of the house. Elenor would advertise by having her girls dress up in their finest attire and then have them get into the carriage and drive them around town so they can wave and wink and flirt with the men of the town. This, of course, caused the women in the town to be scandalized. They would huff and avert their eyes, and if they had children around, they would quickly cover their eyes with a harsh warning of staying away from women like that. Elenor was known to be very kind, though, always feeding those who may be hungry, protecting the women working for her. She was always known to be harsh to those that deserved it, and charitable even when she was down on her luck. It is around this time that Madame Elenor will get a nickname that she will loathe. But like nicknames go, sometimes they stick no matter how much you don't like them. At some point in Eleanor's life, she must have started growing a thick patch of hair on her upper lip. And even when shaving it, it may have left a shadow, giving her an appearance of having a mustache. I'm sure you can see where this is going. One day while dealing cards at one of her saloons or even being at the brothel, it's very unclear exactly where she was when this happened, but a very disgruntled, pissed off man, possibly for losing or just making a mean joke, something happens, but he calls her Madame Mustache, though she probably very quickly shuts that down from him immediately. It's too late because it does stick and people overheard it, and like things go, it ran through the town. Most wouldn't say it to her face, afraid of how she'll actually react. However, that did not stop people from saying it behind her back or using it as a title in a news article. Because again, this was a time that everyone, news was being written about specific people. So if they had a clever little title like Madame Mustache, they would use it. Now, at this point in her life, Elenor was a full-blown gambler and living a life much more on the vice side and no longer towing the line. Now, older in life, she no longer had the care of keeping up her sophisticated lady appearance. Cussing just as much as the men at her tables, she no longer cared what they wore. She traded out the elegant champagne for whiskey herself. So she really was kind of going downhill. She also traveled much, much more in the later half of her life. Her life path brought her to Benwick, Fort Benton, Helena, Salmon, and Silver City, Corny, Eureka, and Virginia City, Deadwood, and Tombstone. So she went a lot of places. Anytime a town would dry up, she would pack up and move on, starting new somewhere else. She would either get a job dealing at a table at someone else's saloon, or if she had the money, she'd open her own. And as soon as she could save up the money, she'd attempt to open her own saloon and brothel. And so now she's gambling, selling sex, or she's not selling her own sex. She is just part of selling sex. And so she's just fully embraced the life of vice now. As time went on, the awe of her started to fade as she was no longer the only female dealer and she was getting older and never truly healed from McKnight. She may have fell into a bit of a depression. This depression will only grow as her skill for poker also started to betray her and she started losing more than she was winning. In my opinion, when she left Nevada City, she meant to retire from gambling, to get herself out of vice, because you can only be so lucky before gambling becomes less of a fun time and more of a bad habit, driving everything you do, consuming every dollar you have. And so, like any kind of vice-related job, stripping, gambling, what else is vice? Just in general, anything like that. You have to have an end game. So when Elenor was screwed over and her end game was ruined and taken from her, gambling no longer was the fun time for her and more of a need of survival. Eventually, Elenor ends up in Brody, California, depressed, broke, and full-blown gambling addiction. Eventually, Elenor will end up in Brody, California. She's depressed, she's broke, and she has a full-blown gambling addiction. She finds herself in Brody, California in 1878, and she's around 50 years old. She still carries herself as if she is the finest woman in town, though, and good for you, Miss Elenor. Possibly because even though she was past her heyday, she was still very notorious for being one of the first women to deal. Even back then, she was kind of a famous woman. She was still often wrote about in news articles, and sometimes they weren't very nice. So I think that she just had to give this appearance that she did not care, like she always did, even when she was younger. She didn't let the men bother her. She wasn't going to allow the news articles and everything being written about her bother her. In Brody, though, her addiction doesn't get better, eventually getting a job working at the Mongolian Saloon, where she will continue to deal cards and continued to lose money. Soon she will have to ask a friend to borrow $300. The friend loans her the money. Elenor, though, will go on to lose the entire sum in the very same night. That is when she will leave the saloon with a bottle of red wine and a plan. Elenor was done. Done traveling, dealing, gambling, and losing. However, that wasn't the only thing she was done with. Elenor had decided after she lost that $300 that she was done with life as well. No one that night being the wiser, she walked out of the saloon with a plan to end her life. Walking alone, drinking her wine, and chasing it with a bottle of morphine, knowing she was taking a fatal dose. The next morning, her body will be found by a shepherd on September 8th, 1879. She was resting her head on a rock. Next to her sat the wine, bottle of morphine, and a goodbye note. The Bodie Morning News reported her death on September 9th, and the article read, "A suicide. Yesterday morning, a sheep herder, while in pursuit of his avocation, discovered the dead body of a woman laying about 100 yards from the Bridgeport Road, a mile from town. Her head rested on a stone, and the appearance of the body indicated that the death was the result of natural causes. Ex-officiary coroner Justice Patterson was once notified, and he dispatched a wagon in charge of H. Ward to that place, who brought the body to the undertaking's room. Deceased was named Elenor Dumont and was recognized as the woman who had been engaged in dealing 21 game in the Magnolia Saloon. Her death evidently occurred from an overdose of morphine, an empty bottle having the particular smell of that drug being found besides the body. The history connected with the unfortunate suicide is but a reputation of that of many others who have been followed the life of a female gambler, with the exception perhaps that the subject of this item bore a character for virtue possessed by few in her line. To the good-hearted women of the town must be accrued praises for their accustomed kindness in doing all in their power to prepare the unfortunate woman's body for burial." So basically, that article read like the facts of what happened, or what they assumed happened, and then also said that they couldn't help but say, oh, this is the fate of most female gamblers, or most female of who join vice life. They end up committing suicide. But unlike most, she never was fallen. They had to add that little tidbit in there. So, another little insight of what it looked like to be a woman in 1800s, especially if you chose to end your life or stuff. But mind you, that was also common for the men of the time too. If they weren't dying in shootouts or bank robberies or death by hanging because of like cops and shit, they also too were overdosing or like committing suicide, especially in their later years, if they were losing everything, if they've lost all hope. This was not uncommon for women, and this was also very much not uncommon for men. So it goes both ways. And this article, of course, read it in a way to make you not want to choose the life of vice. But that, my friends, was the story of the good, the bad, the ugly, but also the glamour, the power, and freedom of Elenor Dumont, the madam who made her mark in history dealing cards. One of the first women known to do it in Americans' history. She was also very good at it. Sadly, she was conned out of her money and her exit plan for the rough and tumble life of vice. After that, gambling becomes survival for her. However, Elenor found her way in making history, and though it mostly is a mark in being the first woman in a specific industry, it is also fun to talk about a part-time sex worker and sex seller. Though she never sold her own sex, she did help provide sex for those around. And she will always be a part of history. And so she was a full-time gambler, full-time card dealer, part-time sex worker, and a full-time history maker. And though we may not talk about her as much as we should, I will celebrate her here on Paying for It for all that she did for the girls who came after her. With that, I hope you have a great rest of your day, a lovely week, and I will see you next week to kick off October, baby. Let's get into spooky season. Don't forget, if you're vibing with me, now you can watch me and the video versions on YouTube. So jump on over there and check it out. And all right, that is all I have for you today, and I will see you next time. Goodbye. And since it's the end of the era of trying to paywall this, let's just chug the rest of my beer, shall we? Cheers, 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 cheers. I will see you on YouTube, and goodbye.
I got something between my legs that'll make a dead man come. Oh, that. I got something between my legs that'll make a dead man come. Oh, that. I'm gonna turn back my mattress and let you all my springs. I want you to find me, daddy, till the bell do ring. Oh, daddy, want you to shake